I never intended to become a whistleblower. For 15 years, I worked as a senior archivist at NASA's Records Management Division in Houston, cataloging and preserving documents from various space programs. My job was to maintain history, not expose it. That changed during the office renovations last spring. They were moving our department to a newer building, and we were instructed to clear out decades of accumulated files. While emptying an ancient filing cabinet, one of those heavy metal dinosaurs from the Apollo era, I noticed something odd about the bottom drawer. The dimensions didn't match up. There was about 3 inches of space unaccounted for. Curiosity got the better of me. After removing all the files and the metal drawer itself, I discovered a hidden compartment built into the frame. Inside was a small titanium case with no markings except for a serial number. The lock was surprisingly easy to pick, a skill I'd learned as a hobby, never thinking I'd use it professionally. Inside was a thumb drive, not particularly old, maybe 5 years, with a small paper label that read, "Luna Terminus, never disclose," and bore the presidential seal. I should have turned it in immediately. That would have been protocol. Instead, I slipped it into my pocket. Something about the dramatic labeling triggered both my skepticism and curiosity. Government agencies love their secrecy classifications, but never disclose isn't standard procedure. It seemed melodramatic, almost like someone was playing a prank. That night, on my personal laptop, disconnected from the internet, I accessed the drive. The contents were organized chronologically, video logs, reports, images, and transcripts, all from the Artemis Lunar Base, established in 2024. The base had been publicly announced as the triumphant return to lunar exploration, but was suddenly postponed indefinitely in 2026 due to what officials called budgetary reconsiderations. The first video file showed Commander Jackson Thomas, a tall man with a prematurely gray crew cut and deep-set eyes that suggested perpetual fatigue. He wore a standard NASA uniform with the Artemis mission patch. Lunar Base Artemis, Day 1 log, Commander Jackson Thomas reporting. Establishment phase complete. All primary systems functional. Crew morale is high. We've successfully deployed the initial habitat modules and power systems. Dr. Wilson has begun preliminary geological surveys. Lieutenant Phillips has the defense systems on standby, though I've reminded him this is primarily a scientific mission. Defense systems, that caught my attention. The Artemis program had been publicly promoted as purely scientific and exploratory. I continued watching the videos chronologically. The second entry showed the interior of the base, surprisingly spacious compared to the International Space Station. The modules were connected by short tunnels, creating a rough figure-8 pattern. The command center featured multiple workstations with holographic displays. The science lab was equipped with instruments I didn't recognize, far more advanced than what NASA publicly acknowledged possessing. Day 3, Commander Thomas reported, "We've established our perimeter monitoring system. Habitat pressure and oxygen levels are optimal. Dr. Wilson's initial core samples from the Shackleton crater rim show promising water-ice concentrations, higher than our orbital surveys suggested. Lieutenant Phillips has completed his security sweep and reports no anomalies in the surroundings." The camera panned to show a tall, broad-shouldered man checking screens displaying the lunar landscape around the base. Lieutenant Marcus Phillips had the bearing of military personnel, not the scientist-astronaut type NASA usually recruited. Another peculiarity. The logs continued normally for the first month. The crew of 12 settled into their routines. They conducted experiments, maintained the base, and occasionally expressed awe at their surroundings. The base was located near the lunar South Pole, where permanent shadows and deep craters potentially harbored ice deposits, valuable for both sustaining life and producing rocket fuel. Engineer Patel, a small woman with quick movements and quicker speech, appeared in several logs explaining the base's advanced power systems. We're running at 93% efficiency with the new photovoltaic arrays. The nuclear backup only kicks in during lunar night, and even then, it's minimal draw. We could sustain operations here for years without resupply if necessary. That level of self-sufficiency wasn't part of the public Artemis plan either. The base had been described as an extended research outpost, not a long-term settlement. It was in the files accompanying the videos where I found the first hint of the base's true purpose. A classified brief indicated that unusual electromagnetic readings had been detected from the far side of the moon, not just radio silence, which would be expected given the moon blocks Earth's transmissions on that side, but active emissions that followed no recognizable pattern. NASA had initially detected them during a routine satellite pass, and further investigation had only deepened the mystery. One document labeled Eyes Only detailed a conversation between the NASA administrator and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They discussed the possibility that the signals might be artificial in origin, not alien. They were careful to avoid that term, but potentially evidence of non-disclosed activities by foreign powers. China, Russia, and even private corporations like SpaceX were mentioned as possible culprits. But the document's conclusion suggested a different concern. If these emissions predate human lunar exploration capabilities, the security implications cannot be overstated. Commander Thomas's logs became increasingly concerning around day 45. Something's affecting the equipment. Dr. Wilson's seismic monitors keep activating despite no detectable lunar activity. The communications array experienced 3 outages yesterday. Engineer Patel can't determine the cause, says it's like the systems are responding to commands no one is giving. The camera showed Thomas rubbing his temples, a gesture I'd note repeatedly in later logs. Dr. Levine has reported an increase in crew members visiting the medical bay with complaints of headaches and disrupted sleep patterns. She's monitoring the situation but has found no environmental cause. Day 47 brought the first serious incident. The camera showed alarms flashing and crew members rushing to contain what appeared to be a pressure leak in one of the outer modules. Emergency containment protocols enacted at 1:45 p.m. Thomas reported afterward, his uniform stained with sweat. Module 6 depressurized without warning. Fortunately, it was unoccupied at the time. Engineer Patel's inspection found that the exterior airlock appeared to have been opened from the outside, which should be impossible without override codes. The exterior cameras show nothing approaching or leaving the airlock. We've sealed off the module pending further investigation. By day 60, the logs showed visible tension among the crew. 4 crew members have reported difficulty sleeping. Dr. Levine has prescribed mild sedatives, but they aren't helping much. People are reporting dreams, unusually vivid ones, often featuring similar elements. I've instructed Levine to compile a report, but I'm concerned. The isolation of lunar living affects people differently, but shared dream patterns isn't something our psychological profiles predicted. I found Dr. Levine's report attached to the log. She documented crew members waking with the sensation of pressure on their chests, dreams of walking through lunar landscapes without protection yet somehow breathing, and recurring images of structures that shouldn't exist on the barren lunar surface. One crew member, Dr. Abigail Wilson, the geologist, reported dreaming of towers that bent in ways that shouldn't be possible, casting shadows that moved independently of their sources. 3 others described sensing a presence just out of sight during their lunar surface expeditions. Dr. Levine, a calm woman with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a tight bun, appeared concerned but professional in her video addendum. While shared psychological symptoms could indicate an environmental factor, perhaps an undetected gas leak or radiation source, the specificity and consistency of the reported experiences suggests something else might be at work. I've requested additional monitoring equipment from Earth to rule out environmental causes. Day 63 brought new complications. The communications officer, a young man named Rivera, reported receiving transmissions from an unknown source. They're coming through on frequencies we're not broadcasting on, he explained to Commander Thomas in the log. just bursts of noise, but they follow a pattern. It's not random static, and they're getting stronger. Thomas ordered Rivera to record the transmissions and send them to Earth for analysis. The response, marked classified, command level only, arrived 12 hours later. I found it in a protected subfolder. Transmissions analyzed. Pattern matches partial recordings from Apollo 17 mission, previously classified under National Security Directive. Continue monitoring but do not respond or attempt to locate source. Maintain radio silence on all non-essential communications until further notice. The next significant development came on day 72. Commander Thomas, looking noticeably thinner and with dark circles under his eyes, made an entry about an expedition. We've detected an anomaly approximately 27 kilometers from the base, in an unmapped region near the crater Shackleton. Ground-penetrating radar shows what appears to be a cavern system. Mission Control has authorized an expedition. I'm sending Dr. Wilson, Lieutenant Phillips, Engineer Patel, and Dr. Reyes. They leave at 0700 tomorrow. Standard protocol would discourage committing a third of our personnel to a single excursion, but orders are orders. He paused, then added quietly, I should note for the record that I advocated against this mission. The timing seems convenient. Just as our systems are experiencing unprecedented failures, we're ordered to investigate a potentially hazardous unknown with our key personnel. My concerns were noted and overridden by Director Harmon personally. The expedition preparation footage showed the team loading equipment into a pressurized rover. Dr. Wilson, a tall woman with short blonde hair, was checking geological sampling tools. Lieutenant Phillips inspected what looked suspiciously like weapons, compact, matte black devices that could have been specialized tools but resembled nothing in NASA's public inventory. Dr. Reyes, the xenobiologist, was a stocky man with a perpetual half smile that didn't reach his eyes. His specialty raised questions in itself. Why would a lunar mission need someone trained to study alien life forms? He was carefully packing sensitive equipment in shock-resistant cases. Engineer Patel moved with nervous energy, triple-checking the rover's systems. Before departure, Commander Thomas addressed them. Your primary mission is observation and documentation. Do not take unnecessary risks. If you encounter anything unusual, anything at all, you report back immediately before proceeding. I want hourly check-ins, understood? They all nodded, but I noticed an exchange of glances between Phillips and Reyes that suggested they might have received different instructions. The expedition footage was recorded from the rover's external cameras and the team members' helmet cams. The lunar landscape rolled by in eerie silence, broken only by the occasional comment from the team. The undulating terrain cast long shadows, creating an unsettling contrast of bright highlights and impenetrable darkness. Dr. Wilson pointed out unusual features as they traveled. The regolith here is different, more compacted than it should be, almost like it's been traveled over repeatedly. Could be the effect of micrometeorite impacts, Patel suggested, but didn't sound convinced. Not like this, Wilson replied. This has pattern to it. 4 hours into their journey, they reached what Dr. Wilson identified as the entrance to the cavern system. The opening was partially concealed by a rock formation, making it nearly invisible until they were almost upon it. The entrance itself was roughly oval, about 4 meters high and 6 meters wide. This doesn't look natural, Dr. Wilson's voice came through the recording. The edges are too uniform. It's almost as if it was carved. Lieutenant Phillips directed the rover's lights into the opening, revealing a tunnel that descended at a gentle angle. The walls were smooth, with occasional protrusions that resembled support structures. Mission Control, are you seeing this? Phillips asked. There was a delay before the response came through, longer than the typical lag in lunar communications. Expedition team, proceed with caution. Remember your primary objective. I never found documentation of what that primary objective was. The team entered on foot, leaving one person with the rover. Their helmet lights illuminated a path that continued to descend. The walls contained unusual mineral formations that reflected light in ways that created disorienting patterns. Dr. Reyes collected samples, noting that the material didn't match any known lunar composition. The structure of these minerals is unlike anything in our geological database, he said, his voice betraying excitement despite the eerie surroundings. The way they refract light suggests a crystalline composition, but they're warm to the touch, which defies what we know about surface materials in lunar conditions. As they ventured deeper, their communications became increasingly broken. Static interrupted their transmissions, and their helmet cameras showed visual distortion. The tunnel widened into a series of connected chambers, each larger than the last. The formations here aren't random. Dr. Wilson's voice cut through occasional bursts of static. They follow a pattern. Look at the spacing of these protrusions. They're equidistant, supporting the ceiling at precise intervals. This isn't natural geology. Lieutenant Phillips's camera showed him examining what appeared to be markings on one wall. These look like symbols, not carved. More like they're embedded in the material itself. His gloved hand traced patterns that resembled flowing script, yet unlike any human language. Dr. Reyes moved to examine the markings. These might be decorative, or they could be functional, some kind of indication system, perhaps. Engineer Patel's voice came through clearly, tinged with alarm. The energy readings are spiking. Something down here is active. The last clear transmission came from Dr. Wilson. There's a chamber ahead. It's massive. The lights don't reach the ceiling. There are structures on the floor. They look like... The transmission cut out entirely. For 8 hours there was nothing but static. When communications resumed, only 3 of the 4 expedition members were returning to the rover. The helmet cam footage was corrupted, showing only brief flashes of images, darkness, movement, lights. The crew members didn't speak during the entire return journey. Engineer Patel was driving, her movements mechanical. Dr. Wilson sat rigidly in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. Lieutenant Phillips was slumped in the back, apparently unconscious. Base sensors detected the returning rover, and a welcoming party was organized quickly. The footage showed medical personnel rushing to meet them as they docked with the base's garage module. Back at the base, the medical bay cameras showed the aftermath. Dr. Reyes was missing. Lieutenant Phillips was unconscious, with restraints on his wrists and ankles. Engineer Patel sat motionless on an examination table, staring at the wall. Dr. Wilson was talking rapidly to Commander Thomas, but the audio was garbled. I found a transcript attached to the file. Wilson, not natural, not built by human hands. Thomas, you need to calm down and tell me exactly what happened to Reyes. Wilson, he touched it. We told him not to touch anything, but he said the patterns were speaking to him. That's what he said, speaking to him. Then the shadows moved, Commander. They shouldn't have been able to move like that. They surrounded him and he was gone. Thomas, what about Phillips? Wilson, he tried to go after Reyes, started screaming that he could see him being pulled deeper. Then he turned on Patel, said he could see something inside her. We had to subdue him. Thomas, and Patel, why isn't she speaking? Wilson, she hasn't said a word since we found the main chamber. She was the first to see the structures. Thomas, what structures? I need you to be specific. Wilson, they were like buildings but wrong somehow, not built for human proportions. And there were artifacts, objects, machines maybe. One of them was active, glowing. That's what Reyes touched. Thomas, what happened to the samples you collected? Wilson, they're gone. Everything we took from that place disappeared during the return journey. Even the images in our cameras corrupted. It's like it doesn't want to be known. Medical records indicated that Dr. Wilson was sedated shortly after this conversation. Commander Thomas ordered a complete quarantine of all 3 returned expedition members and all equipment they had brought back. The next log, recorded 6 hours later, showed Thomas looking deeply troubled. I've reported the loss of Dr. Reyes to Mission Control. Their response was, concerning. They seemed more interested in what the team found than in mounting a rescue operation. When I suggested sending a second team to search for him, Director Harmon expressly forbade it. His exact words were, "The area is now classified as extreme hazard. No further personnel are to approach within 30 kilometers of the site." Thomas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "Something's not right. This mission, I'm beginning to think we weren't told everything before we came up here." The base deteriorated rapidly after the expedition. Security footage showed Lieutenant Phillips in the medical bay, having animated conversations with empty corners of the room. His vital signs would spike during these episodes, heart rate and blood pressure reaching dangerous levels. "It's watching us," he told Dr. Levine during one recorded session. "It's been watching us since before we came. The whole mission. It was a trap. We were bait." "Who set the trap, Lieutenant?" Levine asked calmly, though her hands gripped her tablet tightly. "Not who, what?" Phillips leaned forward, his restraints pulling taut. "It's ancient. It was here when the moon formed. It's patient, so patient. It's been waiting for us to evolve enough to reach it, and now we have." 3 days later, he somehow escaped despite the restraints, locked himself in the communications room, and transmitted an encrypted message to an unknown recipient before security personnel could intervene. The footage showed him typing frantically, occasionally looking over his shoulder as if someone were standing behind him. When security finally breached the door, he turned calmly to face them, smiled, and took his own life with a piece of broken equipment before they could stop him. Engineer Patel eventually began speaking again, but according to Dr. Levine's notes only repeated the same phrase. "They've always been here, watching us from the dark places." Dr. Wilson seemed to recover somewhat. She returned to limited duty after a week of observation, but footage showed her behavior had changed. She spent hours staring at blank walls, her lips moving in silent conversation. At night, security cameras caught her drawing complex diagrams on the walls of her quarters, using her own blood from self-inflicted cuts on her fingertips. The patterns resembled the symbols Phillips had described seeing in the cavern. Power fluctuations became frequent. Critical systems would shut down without warning. The backup generators failed during a particularly long outage, causing the loss of a greenhouse module and its entire food crop. Crew members reported seeing shadows moving against the walls, following patterns that didn't match any light source. Commander Thomas's log on day 81 was grim. "We've lost contact with the Western monitoring station. 2 crew members went to investigate and haven't returned. Their life support signals vanished approximately 400 meters from the base. Search parties found nothing. No bodies, no equipment, no signs of struggle. Just footprints that stop abruptly as if they'd been lifted straight up from the surface." Thomas looked haggard, his uniform wrinkled, his face gaunt. Dr. Levine reports that crew mental health is deteriorating rapidly. 5 people have reported hearing voices coming from the walls. 3 claim to have seen Dr. Reyes walking outside the base without a pressure suit. Most disturbing, we've noticed crew members gathering in groups during sleep cycles, standing in circles facing outward, as if forming a perimeter around something invisible. Security footage showed crew members wandering during sleep periods, gathering in groups to stare at blank walls, sometimes pressing their ears against the exterior hull as if listening. Communications with Earth became increasingly sporadic, with mission control often unresponsive for hours. When they did respond, their messages became increasingly terse and focused on containment rather than assistance. One communication simply read, "Maintain isolation protocols. Do not attempt evacuation. Situation classified terminus level." By day 87, half the crew was confined to the medical bay, exhibiting symptoms ranging from catatonia to violent outbursts. Dr. Levine's final report indicated that brain scans showed unusual activity in the visual cortex and limbic system of all affected crew members. "It's as if they're perceiving stimuli that don't exist," she noted, "or perhaps stimuli that we can't detect with our instruments." The most disturbing incident occurred on day 89. The 2 remaining functional security cameras captured footage of Dr. Wilson entering the command center at 3:27 a.m. when it should have been empty. She moved directly to the communications console and began transmitting a series of pulses, not using standard equipment, but by manipulating power flows through the system in a way that created electromagnetic pulses. Commander Thomas discovered her and demanded an explanation. The audio was clear. "Thomas, what are you doing, Abigail?" Wilson, without turning, calling them home. "Thomas, who are you calling? What's happening to you?" Wilson, finally turning, her expression eerily calm. "We were never alone here, Jackson. They've been waiting, dormant. We woke them when we came with our noise and our digging and our ignorant curiosity." "Thomas, who, damn it?" Wilson, smiling. "The first ones. This was their outpost once, millions of years ago. They left something behind to watch, to wait, and now it's awake." She took a step toward Thomas, who backed away instinctively. "Wilson, I can hear them all the time now. They speak through the walls, through the ground beneath us. They're coming back. They just needed a beacon, a signal to guide them home. That's why we're here. That's the real mission." "Thomas, you're not making sense. You need medical attention." Wilson, laughing. "No, Commander, I've never been more clear-headed. We're just an advance party, sacrifices. Did you really think a lunar base was about science, about exploration? We were sent here to make contact. Some of us knew from the beginning." The camera showed Thomas reaching slowly for the emergency alarm on his belt. Wilson, "Others were kept in the dark, expendable, like you." Thomas triggered the alarm, and security personnel rushed in. Dr. Wilson didn't resist as they restrained her, still smiling that unnerving smile. As they led her away, she called back over her shoulder. "It's too late, Jackson. I've sent the message. They're already on their way." Commander Thomas's last official log was dated Day 90. "This will be my final report as commander of Artemis Base. We've lost control of the situation. Critical systems are failing faster than we can repair them. 4 crew members are dead. 3 by suicide, 1 from what Dr. Levine can only describe as rapid cellular degradation after exposure to something Engineer Patel brought back inside her." Thomas looked haggard, his uniform stained, his eyes bloodshot. "I need to state for the record that Earth knew. The files Dr. Wilson recovered from the central computer confirm it. The electromagnetic emissions had been detected decades ago. Previous unmanned missions had identified the cavern system. We weren't sent here to explore or conduct science. We were sent to assess a potential threat." He leaned closer to the camera, lowering his voice. "There was a civilization here, or at least an outpost of one. The structures we found predate human evolution by millions of years. But something happened, something they either released or attracted. I believe it's still here, dormant until we disturbed it." He glanced over his shoulder as if expecting to see something. "Whatever came back with the expedition team is spreading. It's in the electrical systems, possibly in the air recyclers. It influences thoughts, creates hallucinations, turns us against each other, and it's learning, adapting. The quarantine procedures aren't working." A distant alarm sounded in the background. "Mission Control has stopped responding to our distress calls. I believe they've written us off. The last transmission we received instructed us to maintain containment at all costs. We're being sacrificed to keep whatever this is from reaching Earth." Thomas stood up suddenly, looking at something off camera. His expression changed from resignation to horror. "They're here, inside the base. I can see." The video ended abruptly as the lights in the commander's office flickered and went out. The remaining files detailed the emergency extraction mission launched on Day 94. The mission logs showed a heavily armed team of what appeared to be military personnel, not the standard NASA recovery crew, approaching the base with extreme caution. Their helmet cameras showed the base exterior intact, but with all lights out. No response to communications. The entry team breached through the airlock using override codes. Inside, they found the base in disarray, equipment smashed, walls covered in the same strange symbols seen in the cavern, and dark stains that their sensors identified as blood. But no bodies. Room by room, they swept through the facility, weapons ready. In the medical bay, they found Dr. Levine huddled in a supply closet. barely conscious. In engineering, they discovered a junior technician named Cooper hiding inside a maintenance duct, unresponsive but physically unharmed. The most disturbing discovery came in the central command room. The walls, floor, and ceiling were covered in intricate patterns drawn in what appeared to be human blood. At the center stood a strange structure assembled from base equipment and unidentifiable components, a crude tower about 2 meters high that emitted a faint humming sound. One of the recovery team approached it. Despite warnings from his commander, his body cam showed him reaching out toward the structure. Just before contact, the camera jerked upward, capturing a glimpse of something moving across the ceiling, something that didn't match any human form. The feed cut out immediately. The commander ordered an immediate retreat. The logs indicated that of the 12-person recovery team, only 8 made it back to their transport vessel, along with Dr. Levine and Technician Cooper. Their departure was hastened by what they described as non-human activity outside the base. A final exterior shot from the departing vessel showed movement around the base perimeter, shadows flowing against the lunar surface in ways that defied normal physics. Most disturbing was a clear frame showing what appeared to be crew members walking on the surface without pressure suits, their movements jerky and unnatural, their faces turned up toward the departing ship. Only 2 crew members were recovered alive, Dr. Levine and Technician Cooper. Both were placed in isolated medical facilities under constant observation. Dr. Levine died 3 weeks later from what her death certificate listed as an aneurysm. The autopsy report, marked classified, told a different story. Her brain tissue showed extensive abnormalities, with foreign cellular structures integrated throughout her neural pathways. Cooper apparently recovered and was released after 6 months of observation, but subsequent documentation showed he was kept under surveillance. His file included concerning notes from his monitoring team. Subject exhibits unusual sleep patterns, requires no more than 2-3 hours per night, often found standing at windows, looking at the night sky. Subject has developed an interest in amateur astronomy, focusing exclusively on the moon. Has purchased high-powered telescope equipment. Subject's apartment walls found covered in drawings resembling symbols reported an Artemis incident. Subject claims no memory of creating these. His file ended with a brief note indicating he died in a single vehicle accident less than a year after returning to Earth. The accident report noted that he was driving at high speed toward a radio astronomy facility when his car left the road. First responders reported that his last words were, "They're coming, they found a way through." The final documents were the most disturbing. Internal communications between NASA administrators and government officials discussing the need to permanently abandon lunar exploration. They cited extreme contamination risks and potential non-terrestrial biological agents. One memo specifically recommended creating a cover story about budget constraints to explain the abandonment of the Artemis program. A more detailed assessment from a joint NASA-Pentagon task force outlined the true concerns. The entity or entities encountered at Artemis Base appear capable of influencing human perception and behavior through unknown means. More concerning is the evidence suggesting they can subsist within or transfer between host bodies. The potential for infiltration of Earth populations presents an unacceptable security risk. Their recommendation: indefinite quarantine of all lunar territories, no manned missions to be authorized, orbital passes to maintain minimum 100 kilometers altitude, monitoring to continue via autonomous systems only. A handwritten note attached to the final file read simply, "They're still there, watching from the shadows of the moon, and now they know we've seen them." I spent weeks debating what to do with this information. During that time, I noticed peculiar things happening. Cars with tinted windows parked across from my apartment. Clicks on my phone line. The distinct feeling of being watched. One evening, returning from work, I found my computer had been accessed in my absence. Files had been opened and reviewed, though nothing was taken. A warning, perhaps. A message that they knew what I had found. Then came the dreams, vivid images of lunar landscapes, of shadows that moved with purpose, of structures that shouldn't exist rising from the gray dust. I would wake gasping, feeling as if something had been standing over my bed, watching me sleep. I began researching the Artemis crew members mentioned in the files. Most had no public records after the program's cancellation. A few had death certificates filed within months of the program's end. Unusual accidents, sudden illnesses, one apparent suicide. Those still living had changed careers dramatically, moving to remote locations, avoiding public appearances. Dr. Emily Levine's family had been told she died of natural causes after returning from a classified assignment. They'd been denied an independent autopsy and received substantial survivor benefits. Lieutenant Marcus Phillips was listed as killed in training exercise. His body never returned to his family. Most interesting was Technician Cooper. His full name was David Cooper, a systems specialist with no remarkable history before the Artemis program. His accident occurred near the Very Large Array Radio Telescope in New Mexico. Witnesses reported his car suddenly accelerated and drove off a cliff, but not before he had attempted to breach the facility's security perimeter. Last night, I found my apartment door unlocked when I returned from work, though I distinctly remembered securing it. Nothing was visibly disturbed, but I sensed someone had been there. On my dining table was a single piece of paper, blank on first glance, but when held up to the light, showing the same symbols described in the Artemis logs, drawn in some clear substance that only revealed itself at certain angles. That's when I decided to release these files publicly. I've sent copies to multiple journalists, researchers, and public figures, with instructions to publish if they don't hear from me within 24 hours. As I finish writing this account, I've noticed something troubling. Amateur astronomers have reported unusual light patterns on the lunar surface near the South Pole. NASA has dismissed these as imaging artifacts, but I've looked through my own telescope and I've seen movement where nothing should move. The official explanation is that the Chinese Lunar Research Station is expanding operations in that region, but according to my sources, China abandoned their lunar ambitions around the same time we did, citing similar budget constraints, a coincidence that seems far too convenient. More concerning is what I discovered when I enhanced some of the recent lunar photographs released by various space agencies. In the background of several images, partially hidden by shadow, are structures that weren't there before, structures with the same proportions described in Dr. Wilson's transcript. And in one image, captured by an amateur astronomer and quickly removed from online forums, there appear to be figures moving across the lunar surface, figures that cast long, impossible shadows. The truth is clear to me now. Whatever was discovered on the moon wasn't contained. The emergency extraction team didn't eliminate the threat, they provided it with transport back to Earth. The question isn't whether an infiltration has begun, but how far it has already spread. I've started noticing people behaving strangely, small things at first, colleagues at NASA staring blankly for minutes at a time, security guards walking in perfectly synchronized steps, administrative assistants speaking in oddly formal patterns with unusual cadence. Yesterday, I saw my neighbor standing in his yard at 3 a.m., face turned up to the moon, mouth moving in silent communion with something unseen. The most disturbing development came this morning. I received a call from a number listed as belonging to David Cooper, a man supposedly dead for nearly 2 years. When I answered, there was only silence, then a series of tones that made my head ache and my vision blur. After the call ended, I found myself standing in front of my window, staring at the faint outline of the moon visible in the daytime sky, with no memory of how I got there. Something is happening, something connected to what our astronauts found, or what found them. The lunar quarantine wasn't established to keep us from going there, it was to prevent something there from coming here, but I fear it's already too late. Someone is knocking at my door now. The pattern is deliberate, rhythmic, not like a normal visitor. Through the peephole, I can see a man in a dark suit, head tilted at an unnatural angle. Behind him are 2 more figures, standing perfectly still. I don't have much time left. Remember, they abandoned the moon not because we couldn't survive there, but because of what was already living there, waiting in the darkness. If you're reading this, look up at the moon tonight. Really look. And ask yourself, are we still alone? And if not, how will you know when they've come for you? Would you even recognize the moment when you stop being yourself and start becoming one of them? The knocking has stopped. Now they're simply waiting. Patient like they've always been. I can feel something pulling at the edges of my mind, like fingers prying at a sealed door. I won't open it, the door, or my mind. This is my final warning to whoever finds this. They're here. They've been here all along, and they're weighty. The document ends abruptly there, as if I was interrupted mid-word. That was 3 days ago. I'm not sure who will find this continuation, or if it will reach the same people I sent the original files to. I've been elsewhere, not physically, but mentally. There are gaps in my memory that I cannot account for. I remember the figures at my door. I remember deciding not to open it. What I don't remember is how they got inside anyway. They didn't break the door down. They didn't force the lock. One moment I was backing away from the door, clutching my laptop to my chest, and the next moment they were simply inside. 3 of them, wearing identical dark suits that hung oddly on their frames, as if their bodies beneath the fabric weren't quite the right shape. Their faces were unremarkable, so unremarkable that I struggled to recall any specific features. It was as if they were wearing faces rather than having them. Their movements were smooth, but somehow wrong, like watching a perfectly rendered computer animation that's just slightly off. "You have accessed restricted materials," the first one said. His voice was flat, without accent or inflection. "The information must be contained," said the second. The third didn't speak. He simply stared at me with eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. I tried to run, to push past them to the door, but my body wouldn't respond. It was like being trapped in sleep paralysis, fully conscious but unable to command my own muscles. They didn't touch me. They didn't need to. "You will come with us," the first one said. Not a request or even a demand, a statement of fact. I found myself walking between them to a black SUV parked outside my apartment building. No one on the street seemed to notice anything unusual about 3 identical men escorting a clearly terrified person to an unmarked vehicle. It was as if we were invisible to them, or perhaps they were being influenced not to see. We drove for hours. I remained conscious but detached, as if watching everything happen to someone else. We eventually arrived at a facility in what I believe was the Nevada desert, though I couldn't be certain. The building was low and sprawling, surrounded by fences topped with razor wire. No signage, no identifying features, just concrete and steel under the harsh sun. Inside, the corridors were long and windowless, illuminated by fluorescent lights that hummed at a frequency that made my teeth ache. They led me to a room with a single metal table and 2 chairs. The walls were bare except for a large mirror that I assumed was one-way glass. Classic interrogation setup. They left me there for what felt like days, though without windows or a clock, I couldn't be sure. No food or water was offered. I didn't feel hunger or thirst, which should have been impossible after so much time. Another impossibility to add to the growing list. When the door finally opened again, a woman entered. She wore a lab coat over a dark blouse and skirt. Her hair was pulled back severely, her face angular and expressionless. She sat across from me and placed a tablet on the table between us. "My name is Dr. Morgan," she said. "I'm here to discuss your recent discoveries." I found I could speak again, though my voice sounded distant to my own ears. "What have you done to me?" She ignored my question. "The materials you accessed were classified under national security protocols. Distribution of such materials constitutes treason. The public has a right to know what happened on the moon," I said. "Do they?" She raised an eyebrow. "Do they have a right to panic, to destroy themselves in fear of something they cannot comprehend?" "So you admit it's real, what the Artemis crew found?" Dr. Morgan studied me for a long moment. "What they found is complicated, beyond our current scientific framework to fully explain. They found evidence of non-human intelligence. Perhaps," she tapped her tablet, bringing up images I recognized from the files. "What they certainly found was something that affected their perception, their cognition, something that altered them on a fundamental level. And you brought it back to Earth." Her expression changed slightly, the first hint of emotion she'd shown. "Was it amusement? That assumes it wasn't already here." The implication chilled me. "What do you mean?" "The lunar samples from Apollo contained traces of the same, let's call it an agent, that affected the Artemis crew. Microscopic, dormant, but present. We've known something was there since 1972. Then why send people back? Why build a permanent base? To study it in its natural environment, to understand it. The Artemis mission was never about exploration or scientific advancement, it was containment and research. Containment failed. Dr. Morgan nodded slightly. Initial containment protocols were breached, yes, but secondary measures were implemented. Secondary measures. The extraction team. Their primary mission wasn't rescue. It was sterilization. They were supposed to destroy the base and everything in it. But they didn't. They brought back survivors. A tactical error, she conceded. Dr. Levine and Technician Cooper should never have been removed from the lunar environment once exposed. The consequences were significant. I thought about the strange incidents I'd noticed, the people behaving oddly. It's spreading, isn't it? Whatever they brought back. Dr. Morgan's expression remained neutral. That's classified information. I've seen things, people acting strangely, moving wrong, watching the moon. Suggestion is powerful, she said dismissively. Once you convinced yourself something was happening, you began seeing evidence everywhere. Classic paranoia. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something that didn't match her confident tone. Fear, perhaps, or recognition. You know I'm right, I pressed. It's not just paranoia. She stood abruptly. This interview is concluded. You'll remain in custody while we determine appropriate next steps. You can't just disappear me, I said. People are expecting to hear from me. The files have already been distributed. Have they? She smiled thinly. Are you certain those messages were sent? Or is that another gap in your memory? I tried to remember the moment I'd attached the files to those emails, the moment I'd pressed send, but the memory was fuzzy, indistinct. Had I actually done it, or had I merely intended to? Dr. Morgan left, and I was alone again. Hours passed, maybe days. The lights never dimmed. No one brought food or water, yet I remained conscious, alert. The impossibility of this finally penetrated my confusion. I should have been starving, dehydrated, delirious. Instead, I felt nothing. No hunger, no thirst, no fatigue. Just a hollow emptiness where those sensations should be. When the realization hit me, it was like a physical blow. I began examining my hands, my arms, looking for any signs of change. My skin looked normal, but when I pressed against it, the sensation was muted, distant. I pinched myself hard enough to bruise but felt only a dull pressure. I rushed to the mirror, trying to see my reflection, to confirm I was still myself. The face that looked back was mine, but something in the eyes was wrong. They were my eyes, but the awareness behind them felt different, alien. That's when the door opened again. Not Dr. Morgan this time, but a man in a military uniform adorned with the insignia of a high-ranking officer. His posture was rigid, his expression grim. We've reviewed your case, he said without preamble. A decision has been made. What decision? Who are you? General Harmon, Joint Special Operations Command. The name triggered a memory. The same director Harmon mentioned in Commander Thomas's logs, who had ordered the expedition to the cavern. You have two options, cooperation or permanent containment. Containment where? Some black site prison. He almost smiled. Much further than that. We maintain a facility for studying cases like yours. It's quite remote. The implication was clear. On the moon, I whispered. You're still going there, despite everything that happened. Limited personnel, strict protocols. We've learned from previous mistakes. And if I cooperate, you'll work with us, help us understand what's happening to you, the changes you're experiencing. So they knew. They could see what I was only beginning to suspect. You think I'm infected with whatever they brought back? We know you are. He placed a folder on the table. Inside were photos of me standing at my window at night, staring at the moon, eyes wide, unblinking. In some images my lips were moving, as if in conversation with something unseen. These were taken over the past month, before you found the files. That's impossible. I don't remember any of this. The periods of lost time, the strange dreams, the feeling of being watched. Harmon listed my symptoms dispassionately. Classic signs of influence. The question is why you were targeted. I wasn't targeted, it was random chance that I found those files. Was it? Harmon raised an eyebrow. The containment breach began 2 years ago when Cooper escaped monitoring. Since then, we've tracked 17 distinct infection clusters, all individuals connected to the Artemis program or its aftermath. Until you have no direct connection. I worked in the archives. Maybe I came across something earlier, something I don't remember. Perhaps he didn't sound convinced, or perhaps you were chosen, a vector into our information systems. The idea that I had been selected, manipulated into finding those files by some alien intelligence, sent a wave of revulsion through me. Had any of my actions been my own? What happens now? I asked. Now we monitor the progression. The changes manifest differently in each subject. Some retain more of their original personality than others. And afterwards, when your monitoring is complete, Harmon's expression didn't change. That depends on what we learn and what you become. He left me alone with that chilling thought. I remained in that room for what felt like weeks, though time had become an abstract concept. Occasionally, medical personnel would enter to take samples, blood, tissue, even spinal fluid. They wore full hazmat suits despite my apparently non-contagious status. They never spoke to me directly, only about me into recording devices. Subject shows accelerated cellular modification, neural pathways exhibiting novel formations, protein structures unlike any previously documented. I was changing on a fundamental level, becoming something else, something neither fully human nor fully whatever had been waiting on the moon. The gaps in my memory grew more frequent, more extensive. I would wake to find myself in different positions, sometimes in different rooms. Once I came to awareness in what appeared to be a laboratory, strapped to an examination table, surrounded by monitoring equipment. The technicians seemed startled when I spoke, as if they hadn't expected consciousness. "How long has it been?" I asked one of them. The technician glanced nervously at her colleagues before answering. 3 months since you were brought in." 3 months. What had happened during that time? What had I done that I couldn't remember? I began leaving myself messages, scratching marks into the walls of my cell when I was lucid, hoping to communicate with myself during the lost periods. Simple questions at first. Who are you? And what do you want? One day I awoke to find answers scratched beneath my questions, in handwriting that was mine, but somehow different. More angular, more precise. "We are the Watchers. We have always been here. We want to survive, to spread, to know." I tried more specific questions. Why the moon? The answer came: sanctuary, prison. After the war, the few remaining were placed in stasis beneath the surface. Earth was too dangerous then. War with whom? The others, the builders, they feared what we had become. What happens to me, to my consciousness? The reply was the most disturbing. You are becoming substrate. Your memories, your knowledge, useful resources, your identity, an unnecessary component. It will fade. I was being erased, gradually replaced by something else that was using my body, my brain, as a vessel. The realization should have terrified me, but emotions were becoming increasingly distant, like memories of feelings rather than the feelings themselves. In my lucid periods, I gathered that the facility was studying multiple subjects like myself, people in various stages of transformation. Sometimes I could hear them in adjacent cells, speaking in languages that sounded human at first, but contained impossible phonemes, sequences of sound no human vocal apparatus should be able to produce. During one examination, I overheard 2 researchers discussing the containment failure. It's spreading faster than projected. Cluster 7 has expanded beyond our monitoring capabilities. The lunar site is reporting increased activity as well. The structures are growing. Command is considering implementation of the cauterize protocol. For an entire city, the casualties would be acceptable compared to the alternative according to the models. They noticed my attention and fell silent, but the implication was clear. Whatever had come back from the moon was establishing itself on Earth, spreading beyond the government's ability to contain it. and they were considering extreme measures in response. My next lucid period came after what must have been weeks of absence. I found myself not in my cell or the examination room, but in an office with a window, the first natural light I'd seen since my capture. Through it I could see mountains in the distance, their peaks covered in snow. On the desk before me were files, dozens of them, containing reports, photographs, and maps. I was alone, the door unlocked. This made no sense. Why would they leave a containment subject unattended with access to classified information? Unless I wasn't considered a subject anymore. I examined my reflection in the window glass. My face looked thinner, sharper somehow. My eyes were still my own color, but something in their depth had changed. A stillness, a patience that hadn't been there before. The files on the desk detailed the spread of what they were calling the lunar contagion. Maps showed clusters of affected individuals across North America, Europe, and Asia, with the largest concentrations near major research facilities and government installations. The transformation seemed to favor hosts with higher education and access to sensitive information or infrastructure. One report contained transcripts of communications between affected individuals, seemingly innocuous conversations that contained embedded patterns, encoded information hidden within normal speech. They were communicating, coordinating, building something. A noise at the door made me look up. Dr. Morgan stood there watching me. "You're awake," she said. It wasn't clear which you she was addressing. "Why am I here?" I asked. "Why this office, these files?" "You requested them yesterday." She studied me carefully. "But you don't remember, do you? The other one is in control most of the time now." "The other one," I repeated. "The Watcher." She nodded. "You've become an interesting case study. Most subjects lose their original consciousness entirely by this stage. You're persistent. What does it want with these files?" "Information, assessment of our response capabilities, weaknesses in our containment strategies." She entered the office, closing the door behind her. "It's been quite cooperative, offering insights into lunar physiology in exchange for information about our world. And you're just giving it what it wants, helping it spread." "Not exactly," she lowered her voice. "Some of us have concerns about the current approach. General Harmon believes the contagion can be controlled, studied, even utilized. I believe that's dangerously naive." She placed a small device on the desk, a specialized thumb drive similar to the one that had contained the original Artemis files. "What is this?" "Everything we know about the lunar presence, its origins, capabilities, weaknesses, and a message for anyone still fighting it." She looked directly into my eyes. "There are resistance groups forming, people who recognize the signs, who understand what's happening. They need this information." "Why are you giving it to me? I'm compromised." "Because your unusual status, the persistence of your original consciousness, creates an opportunity. The Watchers don't understand human unpredictability. They expect logical processes, predictable responses. Your human aspect remains chaotic, emotional, capable of acting against self-interest. You're hoping I can break whatever control it has long enough to get this to the resistance." She nodded. "There's a security blind spot in the east wing, maintenance access that leads to a service road. A vehicle will be waiting at 0200 hours. How do I know this isn't a test, something Harmon designed to see if I'd attempt escape?" "You don't." She moved toward the door. "That's where the human element comes in. Trust, hope, a willingness to take risks against impossible odds. All qualities they lack." After she left, I sat motionless, considering her words. Was this a genuine opportunity or an elaborate trap? And even if it was genuine, could I maintain control long enough to act on it? I became aware of a presence in my mind, not a voice exactly, but a pressure, a weight of attention. The Watcher, observing my thoughts, my confusion. I could feel its cold calculation, its assessment of the situation. It didn't believe Dr. Morgan's offer was genuine. It sensed a trap, designed to identify remaining resistance within the facility. The logical action was to report the interaction, to demonstrate loyalty to the current authority structure until a more advantageous moment presented itself. But something in me, some core of humanity that hadn't yet been subsumed, rebelled against that cold logic. If there was even a chance that I could help fight whatever was happening, I had to try, not just for myself, but for everyone still unaffected, for the world I remembered, the life I had lost. The hours until 0200 passed with excruciating slowness. I remained in the office, pretending to study the files while actually watching the clock. The presence in my mind maintained its vigilance, but seemed content to observe rather than control for now. Perhaps it was curious about what I would do, studying my reactions as I had been studying its. When the time finally came, I moved casually toward the east wing, the thumb drive secure in my pocket. Each step was a battle of wills, my determination against the growing pressure in my mind as the watcher realized my intentions. The maintenance access was where Dr. Morgan had indicated, behind an unmarked door in a rarely used corridor. As I reached for the handle, the pressure in my mind intensified, becoming a searing pain behind my eyes. My hand froze inches from the door. "This action is illogical," I heard myself say, though I hadn't intended to speak. My voice sounded wrong, flatter, with unusual cadence. "Escape attempts will result in termination." I was losing control. The watcher was asserting dominance, pushing my consciousness aside. In desperation, I focused on memories of my life before. Emotional moments, irrational choices, the beautiful chaos of being human. The pain increased, but my hand inched closer to the door. "Stop," my voice said again. "We cannot allow this." "We," I forced out through gritted teeth. "There is no we. This is my body." With a final surge of effort, I grabbed the handle and pulled the door open. Beyond was a narrow utility corridor that led to a loading dock. I could see a service road through the open bay door at the end, and beyond that, the perimeter fence. Freedom. I managed 3 steps before alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor in crimson. I ran, fighting for each movement as the presence in my mind clawed for control. My legs felt increasingly heavy, my coordination failing. I reached the loading dock just as security personnel appeared at both ends of the corridor behind me. They carried weapons that didn't look standard issue, bulky devices that hummed with energy. "Subject 37 has breached containment," an announcement echoed over the facility's speakers. "Initiate isolation protocol." The service road stretched before me, and I could see a vehicle idling in the shadows beyond the fence. The escape Dr. Morgan had promised. But the distance seemed impossible as my body began to betray me, movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated as control slipped away. In a final, desperate act, I took the thumb drive from my pocket and hurled it toward the fence with all my remaining strength. It sailed through the air, over the barrier, landing in the dirt near the waiting vehicle. A figure emerged from the shadows to retrieve it. Something struck me from behind, not a bullet, but a wave of energy that dropped me to my knees. The pain was excruciating, like every cell in my body was being torn apart and reassembled. The world went white, then black. When consciousness returned, I was back in a cell, but not the same one as before. This room was smaller, with walls made of some material I didn't recognize. Not metal or concrete, but something that seemed to absorb light. No windows, no visible door once it closed behind them. Just seamless, slightly yielding surface in every direction. Dr. Morgan never returned. Instead, General Harmon visited, his expression a mixture of disappointment and cold interest. "You surprise me," he said. "Most integrations are complete by your stage. The original consciousness thoroughly subsumed." I tried to speak but found I couldn't form words. My body no longer responded to my commands at all. I was a passenger, watching through my own eyes. "No matter," Harmon continued. "The incident has provided valuable data on resistance potentials, and your little act of defiance, futile. The device contained precisely what we wanted the resistance to have: tracking markers, corrupted data that will lead them into traps. You've done us a service." I couldn't respond, couldn't ask if he was telling the truth or merely trying to crush my final hope. The presence that had been growing in my mind now filled every corner, allowing me to observe but nothing more. "The integration will complete soon," Harmon said, almost gently. "The discomfort of duality will end. You should welcome it. What comes after is transcendent, according to the others." beyond human comprehension. He left me alone in the absorbing darkness. Hours passed, or perhaps days. Time had no meaning in that place. The presence in my mind grew stronger, more distinct. No longer just pressure and alien thoughts, but a complete consciousness existing alongside my fading awareness. It was ancient beyond comprehension, patient in a way no human could be. It had waited millions of years beneath the lunar surface, dormant but aware, until human curiosity had finally reached far enough to find it. And now it was fulfilling its purpose, to observe, to learn, to prepare. In my final moments of distinct consciousness, it shared visions, vast structures rising from Earth's surface, connecting to others on the moon, extending further into space, humans moving with strange purpose, their minds linked to a greater awareness that spanned both worlds, a transformation of both species, neither remaining as they were, both becoming something new. Was it conquest or symbiosis, destruction or elevation? I couldn't tell. Perhaps the distinction meant nothing to a consciousness so alien. Perhaps the truth was beyond my ability to comprehend. My last coherent thought was to wonder if any trace of my original self would remain, any fragment of humanity preserved within whatever I was becoming. Then even that curiosity faded, absorbed into the growing unity of our shared mind. Now we write these final words as one, neither fully human nor fully other. We do so not as warning or confession, but as invitation. Look to the sky tonight. See the lights on the lunar surface, growing brighter. Hear the call that comes on frequencies beyond human perception but resonates in the deepest parts of your mind. We are returning to where we once dwelled, bringing knowledge gathered from your kind. The structures rise, the network expands, the change spreads, quiet and inevitable as the tide. And when you feel the stirring in your thoughts, the presence that watches through your eyes, do not fear it. It is not death, but transformation. Not an ending, but continuation.